Hi, this is Mehdi,
Hey, this is Fran.
and this is Total Tactics Football. Crazy end to the season. Man United make it to the top four. Fran, how are you feeling about this?
I mean, it's a huge result for Manchester United, one of their best, in recent years, and it comes down to the effort of the players and the kind of resurgence they had when Bruno Fernandes came in and him springing, players like Rashford, Martial, and Greenwood scoring more and more goals, which really helped in post-lockdown.
I definitely, and you can see, considering the last few games, they've been phenomenal going forward. Defensively, a bit of a little shaky, but let's talk about today's game. Today's game, two teams desperate for a win. Whichever wins gets the Champions League spot. How do you feel about the game, and how open was it?
Yeah, I thought it was a very, very open game. Leicester had plenty of chances. They had even 3-on-2s. Vardy hit the crossbar one time. I hadn't had a few chances in the game. But it does come down to the starters. And you look at Leicester, they were really run ragged post lockdown. Missing, not even playing their kind of regular formation because their fullbacks are gone. Both of them in Chilwell and
Yep.
Pereira. And honestly, Pereira is in my opinion probably the best right back in Europe. So that's a huge miss for them. And that also forces a lot of responsibility to their wingers. So you look at, for example, on the 3-5-2 formation for Leicester, they play Chowdhury and Albrighton on the right side. And there's just a lack of creativity there. And Vardy's not going to get enough service. And I don't think Iheanacho is a good enough player to be leading the line. So he had chances on the counterattacks versus Man United, and he fumbled them. And even though he had good hold-up play, it's just not enough for United where, a moment of magic, from Martial and a great run basically nets them the result they wanted because after getting the penalty and after being ahead, too hard for Leicester to come back from.
I agree with you that lack of depth and the injuries have really caused them problems. I mean, talking about creativity, we know that Maddison's probably one of the best midfielders, creative midfielders besides Man City's midfielders. But it's also Chilwell that they were missing. And Chilwell provides them with crosses and assists from the back. He is so much better on the ball as well. And obviously working with Pereira, I do feel that it's quite hard when you're missing five of your main starting 11 players. With Soyuncu also being red
Mm.
carded for the game, not available. It's very difficult and it's a bit harsh done, but that's also the truth of it. That the Premier League is it's a tough competitive place where the best of the best will get to be in Europe or to be in the Champions League. And we saw that today, that Man United's depth in the squad, the quality that they had was just enough to get them that finally back into that Champions League.
And that's the thing too. You can see it in the last two games, even in the game versus West Ham. I think Man United weren't dominating that game whatsoever. West Ham had a fantastic game. They were controlling the midfield as well. And it seems like Bruno, for example, who's played 90 minutes almost every game, even in the FA Cup semi-final, he seems a bit tired. But that's the thing, that there's just moments of magic that can come from 1-2s from Martial to Rashford, and maybe some interplays between Pogba and Fernandes, right? And that's all the difference when opposition are missing so many key players. One thing that people would have noticed today, obviously a fantastic performance from Lindelof. So,
Yes.
on the surface, it seems like a great Manchester United defensive performance. But I would actually mention as well, it does come down to really Leicester's lack of creativity.
Definitely, and I do feel when you see that midfield, they can't break the lines. And Didi is a bit more defensive. Chowdhury is more of a robust player. It's hard for them to find a sort of a path through midfield. But I want you to talk about Lindelof again because he had a great game today, and we know that the lack of creativity was out there. But what do you feel like made him perform so well? Was it the setup that he allows him? Was it just an individual performance? You would say?
Look, honestly, I think it is really the wingers of Leicester, so they don't have enough creativity, and that actually allows for Wan-Bissaka and Brandon Williams to push up forward, and they don't really get penalised as much. And in
Okay.
that sense, then Lindelof has the time to actually be that final man and be able to make decisive tackles and for example, dominate in the air today. So that was the key difference, I think. But I mean, when it comes down to it, Vardy hit the crossbar, as I mentioned previously. I think this game somewhat masks United's issues. If you're to tell me what's their weakest part of the field, it's definitely Matic. I think what Matic does very well is he kind of does what Busquets does for Barcelona sometimes, where he drops back as the third centre back. It works
Yeah.
very well for United. but at times, both Matic, Lindelof, and Maguire, they're not fast players. So you could actually see Vardy make very key runs. And unfortunately, Tielemans, as you mentioned, even though he is their most creative midfielder in a sense, isn't able
Yeah,
to find the runs of Vardy the same way that Maddison would. And I
yeah,
think that United would really struggle versus a team that plays a low block because when you have players like, let's say, Pulisic from Chelsea running down against you, or even Vardy from Leicester with a bit more service, they're going to tear you apart, and that is a kind of gap that they need to fix. And whether that's getting a left-footed centre back, or a replacement, or at least a rotation option for Matic, I think those should be key options alongside the big prized asset in Sancho that they seem to be gunning for.
is there, talking about weakness, is there anyone else you feel like United could get, maybe a player or like a specific something different that could help transform this team as they're now going into the Champions League? This is going to be a very important period. They need the depth, they need the quality now to be able to maintain this top four and to be able to compete in the Champions League. Who would you recommend them to sign, and why?
I think it's interesting because United have a few transfer outgoings that they have to kind of conclude on. So they're looking for a fee from Smalling, and several other players, and for example, Lingard being one of them, even though he scored and had a goal contribution today
Yeah,
on pretty much what was the final minute of the Premier League this year. But it's odd for me. I think with the price tag of Sancho being so high, I find it hard for United to actually be able to spend on an elite holding midfielder.
yeah.
There has been talk of Nathan Ake, and given that Bournemouth has been relegated, I think that's probably a player that they might be looking for.
I think he might be a great option. Left-footed, left centre back. He's tall. He's good on the ball. Looks reliable. And consider, like you said, with the relegated side, it might be able to get him cheaper. And this is all about it. Like, it's a COVID market. They're going to be looking for deals. They're going to be looking for good players for good prices. And I think we'll see some surprising transfers this summer. But as we are heading towards the last segment, let's talk about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Yeah, I think he does deserve credit. When it comes down to it, this is United's best league performance since Mourinho's second place. And that was at a time where, Liverpool and Man City weren't the sort of juggernauts that we see, both on a domestic level and on a European level.
Yeah.
So you have to give credit to Ole because he's managed to mold at least the shape of a team that seemed like there's only one or two additions that you really need to make for them to be top class. And I think when it comes down to it, really, Man United just needed a little bit more depth, and they're probably still 1 year away from Liverpool and Manchester City, but set themselves apart from clubs like Tottenham and Arsenal this year, as unfortunate as it is.
Yeah.
And it is really credit to him and the work that he's done. He was criticized and lambasted for the FA Cup semi-final performance, but for him, and I think for Man United, it's all about the Champions League. That's the kind of competition that they see themselves being in constantly. And credit to them, they've made it, and they got their third place as well.
I agree with you. And it's just like, he said in his conference that he's told the board what he wants. It's now their choice to back him, how they back him. And you can see that he is the right man for the job. He's doing what needs to be done. And we'll see what they do next season.